Okay, some quick review. 1776. What's happened recently? We've had the proclamation of 1763 after the French and Indian War. That angered colonists. Colonists got angry about the Stamp Act. They organized the Stamp Act Congress as a way to start talking about ways to get away from British oppression. Then you have the Tea Act and the Boston Tea Party. The Boston Massacre takes place. We're all of a sudden on the point of revolution. People are very angry. Tom Paine, who is a journalist, writes a pamphlet called Common Sense that basically says it just makes sense that the colonists should break away in order to live out the values of liberty and freedom that the social contract suggests we should have. So in 1776, the Second Continental Congress, which is a group of representatives from each different colony, they all met and they agreed that they were ready to declare independence. They asked Thomas Jefferson from Virginia to write this declaration. He had a way with words, and he ends up becoming one of the most famous founding fathers in our nation's history. He ends up becoming the third president. We wouldn't know that at the time, but in 1776 he goes ahead and he does write the Declaration of Independence. The Declaration of Independence has some of the most famous words, and it's one of the most beautifully written documents in American history. Jefferson bases it largely off of the ideas of John Locke and the social contract. So the Declaration of Independence, much of it comes straight out of this idea that life, liberty, and property are natural rights, which John Locke said, and that government's job is to protect those rights. And Jefferson also shares Locke's view that if government fails to protect those rights, people should stand up, throw that government down, and create a new one via revolution. That's what the Declaration was all about. So, let's take a look at how it begins. Early on, Jefferson points out that all men are created equal. We can look at this now and we can notice the language. It's not inclusive language. Men. Men excludes women. We also know that this did not include anyone other than a wealthy white man. If you were not wealthy, if you were not a man, and if you were not white, you didn't have a right to vote in most places in the colonies. There were a couple of colonies that did allow African Americans to vote early on, and then they lost it later. But all men are created equal. That they're endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights. Inalienable means rights that cannot be taken away. So just like John Locke believed you had those rights just because you were born, Jefferson believes that just because you are a human being, you have a right to, as Jefferson puts it, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So that's the one difference. Jefferson changes property, which John Locke talked about, to the pursuit of happiness. Many argue that this is essentially the same thing, and the pursuit of happiness is just a nicer way to say property. When we say pursuit of happiness, we mean the ability to try to get the things that you want, the things that make you happy in life. Oftentimes that does end up meaning money and wealth for many people. So life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Jefferson goes on to write that the purpose of government is to secure these rights. We create governments in order to protect those rights. Next of all, the government of Great Britain has failed to do that. Not only has the British government failed to protect the natural rights of the colonists, they have violated these rights time and time and time again. And as you read the Declaration of Independence, he lists off one thing after another that the British did that angered the colonists. He talks about the Stamp Act and taxation without representation. He talks about the lack of voice in Parliament. He talks about the quartering of troops, the forcing of colonists to give food and shelter to British soldiers, even though they didn't want to. All of those things are mentioned by Jefferson in the Declaration of Independence in a very long list that he gives. And finally, he says, therefore, because of all these things that you have done, because you've killed us in the Boston Massacre, because you've tried to take our money without giving us fair representation in government, we are going to create our own government. We are no longer subject to British rule. We are declaring our freedom, our independence, and after 1776, and this comes out in July, Jefferson and the colonists are ready to make a stand. They're ready to fight for their independence and their freedom. And the American Revolution is in its full throes.